why has everybody gone home? Why aren't they all as committed as me? Well, dude, because they don't all own 90% of the firm. And about 3 months later, Putin went into Ukraine and the markets collapsed. That was the window in which we did the deal. It was the only window in which we could have done the deal. Stop talking about your previous business as a failure. Did you learn something? Oh yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, then it wasn't a failure. Deep in focus, hugely passionate. Tell me, when did you first realise you may be suffering from ADHD?
Thank you for deciding to do this without knowing anything about who I am or what Misfit Founders is.
You should do something every now and again that scares you. We'll talk a little later about what I'm doing there next.
I'm curious. So, why did you decide to say yes?
Because I think my founder journey is non-typical. I've been through a few different roles, a few different startups along the way. And I think some of the best founders are people who take those kind of paths. So that intrigued me.
And do you mind giving me just a quick elevator pitch of who you are and also what you do?
I have in the past done recruiting, run beer festivals, run events companies. I've bootstrapped, I've raised angel money, I've had an exit, and right now I'm raising seed for a whole new startup in the events community and digital media space.
Events community and digital media space. What does that mean? What are some of the services that you offer with it?
We're building product at the moment. We're pre-product right now. So the idea of registering for an event or telling people what your event might be about, doing something with that content, capturing the content, making the content available, looking at the data exhaust and what you can do with that are all areas of interest to us.
Okay. Do you have like a SaaS product or is it services?
It will be. It will be. That's the direction we're going in. At the moment, we're prototyping. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm very, very conscious of is that after the lockdown years and people being at home in COVID, one of the things that people craved most deeply was that human connection again, right? Get out of the Zoom window, go and be with your fellow humans. We are better together.
Yeah.
And yet you look at the meetup landscape of people who come together in little formal meetups here, there, and everywhere. Meetup.com is dying on the vine. It hasn't really changed in the best part of 10 years. Now, when you understand...
I've not used it in like probably 5 years.
There you go. When you look at its journey, it was sold to WeWork and then they sold it off for chump change to private equity in New York. Meetup organizers, they're the people who put the work in to actually bring these communities together. They deserve better. So I want to go and explore that space and see what we can do. I've got a few strong ideas and a few good people on a co-founding team with me who share those opinions. So just starting to get dangerous now, see what kind of trouble we can cause.
Ooh, interesting. Meetup V2. Better not call it Meetup.
We're calling it Rodeo.
Rodeo.
Because we are all a little bit long in the tooth and grey in the beard. So this is not our first rodeo, but it will be our last.
Oh, okay. Well, would it be your last?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, we get this right. It's going to take us 10, 15 years. It's going to be an incredibly intense journey. But if it does what I think we can do, then yeah, I'm off to a beach, mate.
But that's in a sense commendable, to be honest. Every single time I talk to founders, but I think it might be a young, restless founder thing where they want the quick return.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like you're looking at a longer stint with this one.
Yeah. Average.
You always had long stints? From how you enlisted everything that you've done?
Some longer than others.
Yeah.
There was a recruiting firm I was with for best part of 10 years. My last major gig was a firm called Mind the Product. I got involved at the very early stages and took it right through to exit. That was about a 12-year journey. But there's been others where I've joined a company and 6 months later it's like, this is a bad idea. Get out.
Out, yeah. So when did you start your entrepreneurial journey?
When I was doing my A-levels, so teenage years, I was living in Portsmouth with my folks. And I started working in a nightclub bar. Pick up a few extra dollars, work in the nightclub bars. And one of my colleagues at that time, a really good friend, Jason, came up with the idea of there's a big empty space next to this club on the seafront. If we could talk the club into using the beer cellar, we could get the beers delivered here, take them outside, put on a marquee, sell some beers. All right, mate. I'm in. Let's make it happen. A few weeks later, we ran a little beer festival on Portsmouth seafront. Yeah, we got through 300 barrels of beer and 90,000 bottles in 2 days.
But I'm curious, how did you manage to make that work, you being so young at that point? Because I feel the reason why I'm asking is I started my first business when I was 17.
Yeah, we'd have been about 19.
Yeah, and every single time, and it was hair extensions, wigs, and so on. I would import them from China, and I would go to hair salons, door to door, and be like, "Are you interested in buying?" And they would look at me, they would scan me up and down. You're a bit too young for me to trust what you're saying and the products that you do. How did you manage to make that work, that festival?
The guy that I was working with, Jason, I was 19. He'd have been about 24. So he was just a little bit older. He came from a military background and was very sort of polished, stiff upper lip, very formal.
Yeah.
He was a charming individual and managed to talk the council into giving us the permit and the nightclub into using their beer cellar. And then he realised one thing that I'd overlooked. I thought if we just put up a marquee on the seafront, people will come and drink beer. Be fine. Yeah. He'd done an extra bit of research. He had deliberately picked a weekend where there were 2 Type 42 destroyers back in town. They'd been out on tour for the last 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So 900 sailors left their ship, hit dry land. They hadn't had a drink in months. We were busy that weekend.
Yeah.
That was it. It was a one-weekend event, but we cleared good money, had a great time. But that was my first entrepreneurial thing, was running that with him that weekend.
It was a weekend
It was just
thing.
a one weekend thing. That was it.
And then what was next? Did you get jobs? What industries did you started with?
Classic sort of went to university because I didn't want to go to work yet. Studied a few different things, worked in a local bar. And then out the back of that, I fell into recruitment. I wrote to a few agencies and said, I just graduated. I need a job. Don't really know what to do. And one of them wrote back to me and said, well, you seem to know how to communicate pretty well. Have you ever thought about recruiting? No. But if it comes with a paycheck, then sure, let's give it a go. So I got into recruiting. That was back in the early mid-90s. And one of my first assignments was building Europe's first Java development team for IBM's research labs down in Winchester back in the day. It would have been 96.
So you hired a large portion of the core team, Java
I built
team.
it. I mean, they were all doing other things at the time, but I managed to assemble a crew that I felt we could cross-train easily enough to understand the right things. They came from the right background. They understood the right component parts to work with IBM, which was not always the easiest thing. If you're going to work for IBM, you need to be priced at less than market rate, and you need to understand what mission critical really means. These guys had previously been in a defense firm, so they were a perfect fit. But we managed to cross-train them, and that became Europe's first Java development team.
Priced less than market rate, so they were hiring cheap.
IBM always used to believe at that time, if you were going to come work for IBM and put IBM on your CV, that was going to help you get pay rises in future. So it would negotiate you down.
Okay. I feel that that's still a trend
I
for
suspect
a lot
that's a trend
of
in a lot of
organizations.
big companies. Absolutely.
Big companies, but startups as well. As with startups, I understand it a bit. You can pull the "I don't have money" card, right? I'll pay you in equity. But big organizations, I feel like I worked in a slightly bigger company here in UK, not large, and I still felt a bit ashamed of some of the budgets that we had for some roles. I was like, yeah, we do. We're making a bit of money, and there's 100 of us, but we don't have budgets for this role. So, do you mind coming in at a lower price?
Yeah.
Wow. And were you at that point, or at any point actually, have you ever been technical?
Oh God, no.
No.
I did a little bit of engineering, computer science work when I was at university, and it was the classic. You're gonna work with a peer partner here in class. Develop something. Just go and play over the weekend. Build a bit of code. Come back, swap it with your peer, and review. I came back in on the Monday and I gave it to my man Stephen. And he looked at it and he said, the way that you're joining the dots here, what you're trying to do, this is fascinating. This is really interesting.
I feel that that's not a good thing.
Also, James, for the love of God, don't ever write code again. So no, I am technically horrible, and I'm not design-minded either. I mean, I ordered a sign for the end of the driveway recently, a sort of your classic, no parking, driveway in use.
Right.
My girlfriend has a great design eye. She looked at it and immediately sent it back because the kerning was so bad. I don't have a design eye at all. What I do is I make connections between either people or things in a way that's unusual and generally delivers outsized returns. So I have my place in the world, but it's not designing or building.
So you're a CEO.
I mean, in the original sort of, I was talked to years ago about the perfect model of 3 for starting a company.
Okay. I'm interested in hearing this.
You want a hacker, someone who can build stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You want a hipster, somebody who can make it look good.
Yeah, true.
And you want a hustler, because somebody's got to go find the money.
So hacker, hipster, and hustler.
Exactly so.
Build it, make it look good, and
sell
make
it.
sure that you can sell it.
Somebody's got to fund it or somebody's got to buy it.
Yeah.
Either way, you need a hustler.
Yeah, true. So you're the hustler.
I am the hustle.
Okay. So you had this interesting journey. Roughly across your career, how many years have you been in the professional world so far? As in working?
Oh, I don't know. 20 plus.
20 plus.
Yeah.
And how many companies did you work for as an employee?
6, 7.
6 companies.
God, I haven't looked at my CV in so long.
Yeah.
Somebody was talking to me the other day actually about the value of a CV. How do you describe your CV? And I look at mine and I think, well, that's basically a list of stuff I don't want to do again.
That hits, because I think I'm the same. Like if I would look at my CV and my interests now, be like, but I don't think anyone's going to hire me of what I want to do, because I have a completely different experience, and there's a lot of things that I don't want to do. And I do feel, actually, that's a really good point. Because even when I was recruiting for my teams, I always look at the CV and look at experience that I need in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always the right way to look at it.
Nope. What you want to do is look at where your organization wants to be next, what it needs in order to get it there. Now, which are the people you're talking to who you feel have the capable to get to there?
Yeah.
They need that capability. They need that drive. And if you're just asking them to keep doing the same thing they've been doing for the last 3 years, sure, they're going to be competent.
Yeah.
But are they going to be passionate? Or are they going to be bored?
So this is a very interesting topic, I would say, because you have a lot of companies that when they reach a certain size, they want the experience person. They want the person that been there, done that several times fold, and they're very senior and so on. But there's a very interesting point of hiring people that are heading there, that are, and that's what they're looking for.
That's where drive and passion comes from.
Yeah.
It's the people who've got something to prove, the people who want to get there. Most of the time in my career when I've been building teams and hiring people, I've hired for attitude over aptitude. If you have the attitude, you will break down walls to get to where you want to be. If you don't have the aptitude, I can train that.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the attitude, I can't give you that.
And how do you train it? What usually do you do to get people where they need to do? What are some of your practices working with the team?
As much as anything else, it's understanding what new world you want to be in, what the vision is, and what part they play in it. Once you do that, you can paint for them an exciting picture. This is where we're going to get to. This is how you play a part in this mission. Once they start to feel that passion, they'll take care of the rest themselves. People don't want to be treated as children. They want to be treated like adults. Show them where you're trying to get to. Make it an exciting journey. And then show them how you'll support them and not get in their way.
Is there any challenges that you face with people that are passionate but are not there yet? Because, for example, we all know the challenges with people that don't have the drive, might have a couple of skills and so on that you can utilize, but don't have that drive. They're just there to do a job, right?
Absolutely.
But then there's also people that are passionate, and I've encountered a lot, right? There's a lot of people that are passionate about their profession. At the end of the day, you get born, and very early on, you see from your parents, from your relatives, from people around you that work is this thing that everyone aspires to. So there's a lot of people that are passionate about their work journey. I've had two types of experiences with people like that. And when I say people like that, I'm like that. I'm 100% the person that stays up until 2. Actually, last evening I stayed up until 3 a.m. Doing some stuff for Misfit founders because I'm like so passionate about what I'm doing.
Deep in focus, hugely passionate. Tell me, when did you first realize you may be suffering from ADHD?
Actually, I think a year ago I started asking myself questions. And,
same goes.
and Nikki, my partner, keeps on telling me, dude, go and get yourself checked because you can get medication. But I've been thinking, one, yes, I could get myself checked. Apparently, the process is a bit cumbersome and it was whatever expensive and so on.
It's either expensive or you can look at the NHS and say, you know what, it does have rather higher priorities.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody who can't stay focused and get a thing done or gets too deep in focus and goes through till 2 a.m. and losing track of time. The
other thing is, I'm not sure I mind it that much.
I don't. I've come to the conclusion over the last few years, watching a bunch of friends go through diagnosis and get a formal confirmation of ADHD. Sure. Do I have some? Sure. It's a spectrum. Everybody has a little bit, right?
Yeah.
How bad is mine? Well, I've managed to build a fairly professional career, managed to build a couple of companies, and it doesn't seem to have held me back too much. So it's nice to be aware of where I might have weaknesses.
Yeah.
It's nice to be aware of what techniques I might employ to try and balance those. But do I need medication for it? No.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this. Sometimes I do have moments where I'm like, God damn it, I just fly from one thing to another. I start doing something here and then half an hour later, half
job.
Do you have
I've got half jobs everywhere. I've half done that one, half done that one, half done that one.
But there also but with this also comes the fixation for things that you're super interested in.
Yep.
And I enjoy that. I wouldn't want to let that go, to be honest.
Not at all.
Do you feel like you have ADHD or ADD?
I spoke to a specialist.
As in, are you hyper active?
I am too active. At one point, there was somebody on my last team who used to call me the Zoom spider. What she meant by that was, every time I see you in the Zoom window, you look like you're trying to climb out. Yeah, makes me uncomfortable. I can't sit still for that long. Okay. I get itchy. During lockdown, I think with a whole bunch of other hipsters, took up sourdough baking. One of the things I've discovered is that...
Random thing.
Oh, it's super therapeutic.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because you feed your starter in the morning when you have a bit of breakfast, and then go to work. And then an hour later, you come down, do a quick mix, 10-minute break, do something with your hands, changes your brainwave patterns, get more creative, go back upstairs, sit down, work for another hour, smash out some problems, do a few calls. Oh, I need to do some stretch and folds. Back downstairs for 5 minutes, move the dough around, back upstairs and work for an hour. It gives me a beautiful regimented pattern where I'm working for an hour, then I take a break, I refresh, get creative, come back, go again. So I've actually maintained the sourdough. I can go to the shop and buy a loaf of bread now, but I keep baking sourdough. It's not just because I like the bread, it's because I like the way that it puts some structure to my day.
Yeah.
If I'm sat at a desk staring at a screen for too long, I find my creativity starts to drop. But getting up, doing something manual, and then sitting back down, it helps. It's like a little reboot for your brainwaves.
You know, I feel that I'm having a revelation just now when I'm talking to you about this and you're explaining that, because I've never felt like I had ADD or ADHD when I was a avid smoker. I smoked for 18 years. I quit smoking about 8 years ago. And when I was working, I used to do exactly that, exactly what you're describing. I would go and have a smoke, have a ciggy outside, and come in, bam, 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 focus.
That's it.
Because I knew that maybe in an hour or whatever, I'm going to have another cigarette or I'm going to get a coffee break and so on. So I had everything compartmentalized in a sense,
Exactly that.
my work. And since that went away, it's a lot more chaotic to me. Like, because I don't have
There's no
time.
structure.
But I guess that's why Pomodoro clocks are there.
Same principle, yeah. I mean, it's some of the sort of things that work there. But for me, sourdough gave me that structure because I'd also be looking at it and saying, if I don't do that now, that dough will spoil. So I need to go do that now.
Right, yeah.
So it enforces that structure upon me.
Yeah.
And then also you get the really great sensation at the end of a day of go, hey, I made you this. That's a great feeling.
How much sourdough do you?
Oh, maybe
Work-
two, 3, 4 loaves a week.
Mm.
Depends what's going on. You know, sometimes I'm up in London for meetings or whatever. I mean, if I'm out of the house, that's a no-bake day. But if I'm just in the house, just doing calls or emails or working on a deck, then yeah, I'll bake a couple of loaves that day.
What you do with all of it?
Give them to friends.
Right.
Yeah.
You should start selling it and make a little business.
The moment you take it, I think the moment I turn it into a business is the moment I'd lose the passion for it. I do most of the cooking at home. I enjoy cooking, but it's the same thing. It's doing something different. It's not a screen. It's not doing phone calls. It's something manual in the kitchen,
Yeah.
but it's a creative outlet. That also came from running a conference business during lockdown. When lockdown happened, we've been running our business for about 10 years. It was really stable, well respected. We had a team of about 15, 16 people.
Which one was this?
This was Mind the Product. We were a community and conference business for product managers around the world.
Okay.
And it was super stable. We'd spent a decade getting it to this point. And when lockdown happened, boom, your revenue disappears.
Oh yeah.
And like, holy hell, what do we do now? And one of the things that I started doing was cooking a little, because one of the things that was driving me insane was watching this business crumble and trying to figure out what we were going to do. I had no control over the external factors, but I could go into the kitchen and say, I'm going to cook dinner. I now had control over my space.
Yeah.
It felt like a sense of sanity. I could do something manual. I could control my environment. I could control the outcome. There we go. And I've now done a nice thing. Mentally, it felt good. And then you go and watch the news every night and you're like, everything's getting worse and the country's being run by idiots and there's nothing I can do. So cooking brought me a little bit of sanity through that period.
Oh yeah. It was a tough period.
If you want the menu, go find my Insta.
What? Well, definitely. I might give it a try. I might need to get Nikki to help me because I'm a disaster in the kitchen.
My timekeeping is actually pretty good, which is rare with ADHD types. Time blindness is often part of the struggle. For me, I know I'm not full ADHD because my actual manual timekeeping in my head actually seems pretty tight. So that helped.
So I want to ask you about the business and the setup when the pandemic hit. But before that, just to backtrack a bit, we got into talking about ADHD, which is great. I think there's so many founders out there nowadays that have ADHD.
Huge proportion.
But going back to initially what I was going towards, there are people that are passionate in your team and you need to enable them.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that are a lot easier to mold, and I don't like the word mold because it sounds like you're manipulating and stuff, but like to work with, to shape them, sculpt them the way they want to get to where they want to get. But there's also people that you have a bit more of a challenge to get there. Although the passion is there, back in the days, I would say, well, if there's passion, you can achieve anything and you can do anything, but it's not always like that.
It's not all about that. I worked for a guy a long time ago. Hi, chappers, if you're out there. Mike talked to me about, I think it was originally a British Army approach. He was an ex-Sandhurst guy, but he talked about this idea of management by exception. Right, talk me through this, Mike. What do you mean? And he'd say, to use the army analogy, you wanted to take that hill. Management by exception was this idea of saying, I'm not going to tell you how to take that hill. What I'm going to tell you is, I'd like you to take that hill. I would like you to take that hill by 6 p.m. this evening. And I would like you to take that hill with no fewer than 20 casualties. Okay, off you go. There's your guardrails. If it's going to be later than 6 p.m., you have to report back and check. If you suspect there might be more than 20 casualties, you have to report back and check. But if you can do it within the confines that have been set, you have freedom and autonomy to go and achieve the outcome.
Yeah.
With a lot of creative people, I find that that's quite empowering, is to say, that's the outcome I'm looking for. I don't want it to cost more than this. I don't want it to take longer than that. Go and experiment. Let me know how you're going to get there. And give a certain amount of freedom to experiment.
I can see a lot of benefits with that, because in a way you have a lot more awareness of what's going on as well as a leader, because people are in the boundaries of that, and they communicate a lot more because those are the instructions. I can also see challenges if deployed in an environment where people don't like being told, being given very strict or very specific instructions.
Absolutely does not work for everybody. From my perspective, if you want detailed instruction and micromanagement, working for me is probably a bad idea. I don't like to micromanage people. So one of the things I've always done is when I'm interviewing and hiring is try to dig into that a little bit. How do you like to work? If you want me to specify how you go and achieve a thing, this probably isn't the job for you. If you need to feel as though I'm watching over your shoulder and you've got that validation every step of the way, it probably isn't the job for you. So that's on me to say, I don't like to micromanage. I like to tell you where you're going, and I'd like you to come to me when you want the support. But that's on me to communicate. I have a weakness. My weakness is going to be, I'm not going to micromanage you, and I'm not going to be checking in every hour. Now, if you feel that's a situation that's going to be difficult for you, this ain't right.
Yeah.
I think there's something in there to say, it's not just about me telling somebody whether they're right for the job or not. I also need to give them enough information for them to be able to make the decision, are they right for the job or not? Because most people, if they learn, oh, Christ, this looked like it was going to be awesome, but now that I've talked more about it, I know it's not going to work and I don't want it. Great. Well, you just saved everybody a bad hire. So give them the information to make that decision. And at the end of that session, they'll either say, this is brilliant. I really want to work with you. What can we do to make this happen?
Yeah.
Or they'll say the exact opposite. And they'll say, thanks for your time. Appreciate the interview, but I don't think this is for me. Well, great. You both just saved yourselves bad hire.
And do you have a template? Did you make yourself a template of what you asked them, or is
that sounds way too organized. No, I'm not quite that organized. No, it tends to be, much like this podcast. You've got certain things that you want to dig into along the way, but have you templated every question?
No.
No.
I like to, because there's so many aspects of it as you talk and as you mention certain things. It's like, okay, so it's a genuine interest.
Yeah.
In how you apply some of the principles, how you do things, how you feel about certain things. So that I think that's, for me, that's the secret recipe.
I believe
not to ditch or have a stab at people that are really good interviewers that do a ton of research on their guests. I've done zero research on you, mainly because I'm genuinely interested in discovering who you are and your background and everything. Question: when you set goals with your team, again, given what you told me that you want to empower the team and you want to have them come up with solutions and so on, how does that usually work? Are you part of that process, or do you give them a specific challenge and say, okay, here's the thing, come up with the goals, come up with the metrics, and let's talk? Or how does it work for you?
This is one where I'm going to have to hold my hand up and say, this is something I'm working to get a lot better at next time around. So the last time around, I was instrumental in hiring a lot of the people, but we had a bunch of leaders within that team who were superb at setting direction, setting goals, and getting into the detail. I was pretty much never that person. So shout out folks like Amy Roberts, Emily Tate, Annalisa Plain, who were absolutely superb at saying, this is where we need to get to. These are the dates along the way. These are the metrics that we need to hit along the way. They would be deep down in all of that detail. And I couldn't have done it without them. Absolutely. The glory goes to them on that. It's something where In hindsight, we brought on a lady to work with us at one point called Emily Tate, who's now actually running that whole show. Watching the way that she worked with that team and how she set that stuff, it made me realise how bad I was at that. It's one of those classic things of you don't realise what good looks like until you see it. Now I've seen it, I can look at me and say, holy hell, I'm really sorry. I was terrible at a lot of that stuff. Had some of the right ideas, but never really went the hard miles. I was too chaotic. So I'm trying to get much more structured in the way that I work, but I've got some work to do there for sure.
Why? I mean, I'm asking, why do you reckon you need to get better at? If, for example, in your previous setup, things worked out just great with your leadership, what is it?
It worked well in the last one because of the quality of the people that I had around me. But I should also recognise they took more weight than was actually needed in many of those circumstances. There were times there where I should have been taking more of that weight and I simply wasn't.
Right.
And I don't think that was fair on them. They carried a little more than they should have done on quite a number of occasions. And I need to be a little bit more in that detail. I'm not good at it. I don't like it. But frankly, that's the thing I can get better at. I'm not going to get better at everything. I did a leadership course years ago. And the person running the course went really deep onto saying we need to identify all of your weaknesses so that you can spend time working in them and get better at them. Whoa. That's going to make me very miserable, and I'm never going to be as good at it as somebody who naturally enjoys that space.
Correct, yeah.
So I'll lean into my strengths, thanks, and I'll work in those spaces. But I can also recognise that those weaknesses lent to more weight falling on others in the past than perhaps was optimal. So I don't need necessarily to go deep into those weaknesses and become perfect at them, but I can do a better job of recognizing them and sharing that load.
Yeah, I can 100% empathize here. Like, I feel like there are so many times in my journey, like I'm an exited founder as well. So I sold my business last year. I don't know how much you know about my journey. Sold my business in December, and I was playing the CEO role. I have a co-founder, Nikki, that you just met. We were partners as well in business. I'm more of a generalist, and I think that's why I took the CEO hat, because I was doing the connections like yourself, hiring, partnerships, everything, the ops here and there. I was doing so, and I think it also helps our ADHD in a sense.
Oh, it does. It keeps us stimulated and energized.
Yeah, exactly.
The moment you leave me for 2 days with a spreadsheet is the moment I've lost interest in the entire show.
Yeah, it's like, I quit. You're all fired. I'm closing.
Yeah,
I'm closing
absolutely.
down.
My last business, it really started to accelerate when we put one particular person into the COO role. She excelled and she mopped up for so much mess that was made by myself and others. The next one that we're doing at the moment, one of the first things that I looked to fill in the co-founding team was somebody who would be awesome on the operational side of things. I know it's a weakness, but there are areas where you can sure as hell hire for that and make sure that you've got the right support, but then also have that open conversation and say, look, there's stuff here that I'm really bad at, so I'm going to lean on you. But you also need to feel that if you feel I'm leaning too hard or letting too much slip, please call me out on it.
Yeah. It's also very hard when you're not good at many things as a leader, right? Because I've had situations where I felt that I could have contributed more to helping the team.
Yep.
But I'm like, I don't know this area, and I can help a tiny bit, but not enough to make a difference. And sometimes you can feel very, not just guilty, but beat yourself up because you think, I'm rubbish. Like, who put me in charge as a founder and CEO? Because look, I can't even help my team here and there.
Yeah.
I think in the early days is a bit different, but as you evolve and the team becomes more compartmentalized and has deeper expertise in certain areas, when there's a lack, as you grow and scale up, it's harder for you as the CEO to fill that lack or that void.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've been working hard on over the last year or so is just trying to build in a little bit more time to reflect every now and again. And it's not about saying, how could I have done that last situation perfectly? But it is about saying, could I have done something slightly better that would have made a difference for the people that I was working with? But building in time for reflection is probably one of the biggest things that I've been putting effort into for the last 12 months. And it's more powerful than I ever realized it would be.
Sorry, building.
Building in time for reflection.
Right.
I mean, I'll give an example. I did a pitch call recently with an investor over in Dublin. And as we came towards the end of the call, he's like, right, we've got 10 minutes left. Let's talk through feedback. Are you open to feedback?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's going to be fairly abrasive. Is that okay? Yeah. So we talked through some feedback. There's a back and forth conversation. And every time I got to the end of it and I reflected back on it, I thought, usually feedback just leaves me wanting to go off and do the next thing. Got to the end of this session and the guy left me thinking, I want more of this. This is amazing. It was so well crafted as feedback that it made me thirsty for more. Even though it was a fairly abrasive message in some ways, it was a rough message to take. But it made me realize, actually, feedback is something that as people, as managers, as leaders, we have a tendency to do pretty badly, I think. And I realized that because that was probably the best I've ever seen. And I'm not a young guy. I've been around a while. It worried me a little that I could get to this point in my career still not really knowing what good feedback actually looked and felt like.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was like, right, I'm going to sit and just reflect for 10 minutes. Why were the reasons that this was so good? What were the component parts? Reflected on that, learned the lesson. Right, let's whack a post up on LinkedIn. Just note down, partially so I've captured the learning for my own benefit, and partially because it might help a few other people out there. I've not had a LinkedIn post go that nuts all year with the amount of people that responded.
I need to check it. When did you post it?
A couple of days ago.
Couple of days ago?
Yeah, it's recent. With people saying, this is fantastic. That was amazing. This has been incredibly helpful for me. This is the kind of thing that I've struggled with so much over the years. It's like, this is a real thing, isn't it? There are an awful lot of leaders out there who have no idea how to give feedback or how empowering it can be. It kind of worries me that we can all get to this stage in our careers and be so neglectful of what should be a basic. To your point, how do you develop staff? Well, feedback. Feedback is how you develop staff. And yet, I proved to myself and quite several thousand people on LinkedIn that apparently we have no idea what we're doing.
So what made it such a good piece of feedback?
He checked that I was open-minded and ready to receive rough feedback. And then every piece of feedback he gave me, he could say, right, you did this.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel like this. I can see why you did it. It was rooted in this. Here's an example of where I made a similar mistake earlier in my career. And here's how you might improve on that next. And then at the end of the feedback session, he took 2 minutes to say, that must have been a little rough to be on the receiving end of. Are we good? Is there anything you'd need to clarify? And as well as the actual detail, the evidence, the actionable points, it was also just the sheer empathy that it was delivered with. It was like regular check-ins. You okay with this point? Anything you need to check? Anything I can clarify?
That's masterclass in feedback.
It really was.
So to untangle it, because you've explained it really well. I can't say untangle it, but for my own...
Anybody who wants to read it, come find me on LinkedIn. It's in my recent activities.
Yes, for my own ADHD mind and stuff. So, gave you feedback. This is how that affected a certain situation or person.
Yep.
And this is how to act on it. Not
only that, the additional point was he pointed out, and I recognize it because I made that mistake myself.
Right. So
and what that does,
relatability.
When you're on the end of it, it makes you feel, well, your career seems to have recovered okay. Yeah. So this is a mistake I can come back for. There's hope. And it gives you that positive lift. You've just been given a kicking, but you also know, I can move forward for this. This guy did, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that is so key, and you're so right, because if I think about it, I've never paused to see why some of my some of my feedback sessions with teammates and so on, and teams were successful, and I left feeling good versus not so good. But you're right, every single time I created that relatability chain with the individuals, talking about my experience with that and how I fucked up at some point in the same manner and so on, were those sessions that went well. Like everyone left thinking went well. And I think you're right. It is because, you think on the receiving end, you're like, well, look, he's turned out fine and so on. But I think it also, going deeper, it shields the receiving end from feeling like they're attacked, right?
Exactly
Feedback can feel like that.
Yep.
But if you empathize and you relate to what you're giving as feedback and say, look, I've been in the same boat, or I am in the same boat in this situation and so on, then it automatically switches from seeing as you being criticized to someone giving you advice and helping you out.
That's also the fact that they've opened up and been a little bit vulnerable. Here's where I screwed up before. Okay, I can empathize with you. You're trying to help me.
Yeah.
It's a leveler.
Very true. Yeah, I know that's really good. I need to read that.
I felt it might be useful to a few, so I thought I'd sling it out there. I was genuinely astonished by how many people jumped into the comments to say, thank you for posting this. This is really useful. So yeah, it's a real thing. It's a problem. We are, as leaders, bad at feedback. I'm just going to leave that one there.
Yeah. I still am. I don't think I've...
Yep. I haven't cracked it yet, but I sure as hell know what good looks like now, and that helps.
It still hurts sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But even identifying it, I think when you're on the receiving end, if you know what good looks like as feedback, you can set the stage with whoever's, helping you with that feedback and say, oh, can you structure it like this, more like this? I think it will help me if you structure it like this. No, really good. And when you said time for reflection, it kind of stuck from that perspective, feedback. But I don't know about you, but I found myself with Nikki while running Jigsaw, moments where we're so deep into delivering and work and the daily routine and so on, that we had at times months where we wouldn't get together and have a reflection session and a looking forward strategic thinking type of session. And every single time we've done that, after a long time of just grinding with work, I felt so relieved, one, and a lot more confident in where we're heading. And that was because, we'll go on a local pub in the evening after work with the dog, having a pint, dinner, and just free flow chatting about stuff. Yes, giving feedback and looking at, that situation there was terrible, but this is how we recovered. Let's try to do this thing. But also looking at, okay, so what's our next move? How do we get to the next stage and so on? And having those very loose, over a beer type of conversations help quite a lot. Even at the kind of like leadership size, I think a lot of people think it's been a culture in a sense, at least here in UK. I don't know in other countries, but when I was working in London, I would go out with my colleagues all the time, and I felt that it was so great because we were bonding, but there are so many ideas that were spun from just unstructured random conversation. But at a leadership level, it's the same thing.
There's a couple of things that I've found that have been incredibly helpful over the last few months. The first is, after a meeting or a call or a piece of feedback or a thing that didn't go as planned, I take 10 minutes and go outside. I think better when I'm standing and moving. I mean, it's why salespeople are told to make sales calls standing up, right? They think faster and they're more authoritative. Classic bit of old sales training. I think faster when I'm standing up. I know that.
Yeah.
I am more creative when I'm standing up. During lockdown, Zoom was driving me nuts, so I started doing walking calls with people. Super helpful for me. And then since then, what I've found is if I need to reflect on a call that's not gone well or a thing that I need to learn from, take 10 minutes, go and walk. I'm near the beach. I can go and walk along the beach, but even just walking around the park or around the block or whatever, just take 10 minutes to walk. Because you're not distracted by your notifications, your email, your phone, your dog, your kids, the sourdough that needs flipping, whatever. Just take 10 minutes and go and walk. Let your brain quiet itself and process what just happened and see if you can find the gold. It's in there. So I found that one really helpful. The other one that's working well for us at the moment with Rodeo is when we first started getting together, Josh and I have known each other for years. Andy, a little bit newer. I've only met Andy recently. And we wanted to make sure that we were, with product discussions, you can figure out what you want to build next and what you're going to test, and that's just good product discussions. But to me, there's a deeper layer. There's cultural alignment.
Oh, yeah.
What do we believe in? What do we hold dear? What kind of values do we want to hold? What kind of company do we want to grow up to be?
Yeah.
So when we first started this, we started by saying every Monday we'll get brunch. And we go and meet in a cafe somewhere and get brunch, bacon and eggs, whatever. But we've maintained that ritual. Every Monday we go do brunch. And we've worked through so many different aspects of what we might explore in future, so many different, as you say, ideas, creativity, whatever. But we've maintained the ritual. We've been doing this for months now. Interesting thing that occurred to me that happened, I think it was at SaaStock actually. Talking to somebody who was talking about the early days of Google. Apparently, back in the early days, the founders would get together every Sunday. They'd get together for a Sunday afternoon, have a drink, and a bit of chat. But it would be every Sunday afternoon for months. And then you look back at Google and say, as that company set out on its journey, holy hell, that had tight alignment, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think accidentally we kind of started doing that same kind of ritual. But it does feel like every time we sit down now, right, what about this? What do we want to do with this? Where do we want to go with this? It's almost like we're finishing each other's sentences. That alignment now is so tight. It's beautiful.
Nikki and I at times felt that. I think when we would take the time to have a structured, unstructured conversation at a pub, just the two of us amping ourselves up and discussing about certain things, the future of the company, the team, this, that. It was very, I loved those conversations. But then again, also when I was working in London, and I think this is one of the things that I'm missing from working in an office with people. We would finish and we would hit the pub and have really awesome conversations. Now, I know that's not for everyone, but for me, that worked really well because I can't read books. I struggle reading books. So I don't read that many books per year because of my ADD, my mind flies away and I start making stories and concepts from small paragraphs that I read. So rather than taking everything in, my mind just flies and starts thinking about this, and I realize I've read 2 pages and I don't know what I read because I was thinking about that paragraph that I read the long time ago. And I felt that when I was working in an office with people, that I could go out after work and chit chat about a variety of things that we were passionate about, work related, so many ideas, and your mind flies and you create these concepts out of thin air. It worked better than structured workshops for me. Now with Nikki and I, when we did that, it was amazing because there was all of these ideas coming up, but I never felt like I missed periods of time, because even if we would go out with Peanut in the park for a quick walk or something like that, we would still talk about work, this and that. So we were very tight as business partners in a sense. And I realized that not everyone has that, especially now over the pandemic, where, you get together as co-founders in remote parts of the world. And actually, I was just interviewing a SaaStock, Daria from Sales Room. I don't know if you know her. And her business partner is in US and she's in UK. and I was talking to her on how they deal with that, but also her culture and her company's culture is a bit different, right? Even the way they had their get together off site and so on it seems like they're a lot more analytical and a lot more focused on product. Let's say less about the tightness of the culture and relatability and the feeling side of it, right? Where like I feel like I'm a lot more of an emotional person. I feel like with Jigsaw, we started over the pandemic properly. Our entire team we've never met in person with our entire team until just before selling, when we got a off-site. And it just changed a lot, the dynamic for me, because I'm like the in-person type of person.
I mean, for me, that's the magic of events and conferences. People were asking me a while back, how did you do what you did with Mind the Product? You always seem to know the right people to talk to next. How did that happen? Well, part of it is that early career in recruiting. It gives you a little recruiter lizard brain. I mean, my LinkedIn is out of control. I can always find people. Recruiting is fundamentally finding somebody who didn't want to be found and persuading them to take a call they didn't know they wished to take. But it's also the conferences for me. I refer to them as engineered serendipity. The engineering part is to say, what kinds of groups of people are likely to be interesting for the next phase of my journey? The serendipity part is then saying, be in the room. Who knows what conversations will emerge? Who knows what ideas, what thoughts will be inspired? The engineered part is saying, okay, I'm going to go to SaaStock. I'm going to need the app on my phone. I'm going to need an extra battery to get me through the afternoon. I'm going to need to be fit and healthy and full of energy.
Yeah.
The serendipity, you can't force that, but you can create the circumstances for it to occur. So even if you don't have a team where you're in the same place, you can still find it's not always the person that's inspiring. It's the opportunity to be with people and have those conversations where randomness occurs. That's where inspiration occurs. So for me, events can cover that to an extent. I talk to a lot of people that, senior tech and product leaders, and they're saying, what's the hardest part about bringing new people into the team during remote times? And they'll say, well, we're a distributed team now. So they can't be in the office and learn the institutional knowledge from the people by the coffee machine and the people by the water cooler and learn from their seniors. How are you addressing that? We're trying to send them to get out to meetups now. So even if they live remote, there's going to be a meetup in your town with those kind of skills. That gives you a chance to go and hang out with some people who've got more experience in that industry that you can learn from and develop.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just being with other humans can be a really good start to this. And there's so much of that we lost through the pandemic. I mean, co-founder of Airbnb, Chesky, was on Reuters TV just the other day. And the quote that sticks with me, he was saying, we are living through the loneliest period in human history, and it is time for the re-emergence of physical communities. And that's partially one of the reasons why we're so inspired to go at this with Rodeo and build this new platform, is because the tooling in this space is just not fit for purpose.
It hasn't been since the pandemic, I feel.
Nope.
Many have tried, but failed miserably.
A lot of the time it's because you've got a couple of engineers who look at it and say, this isn't fit for purpose, let's build a new one. But it's an engineer building a thing to scratch their own itch, as opposed to someone who's been deep in the problem space of actually running communities and conferences and events year after year in multiple different countries around the world. Engineers generally, when you give them a specific problem and say, solve that, they're great at coming up with a way to solve that specific problem. But when you build a platform for events and communities, well, that problem is a different shape in all of the different countries that you might go to. Those cultures are different.
Yeah.
So you need that wider exposure in order to build a platform that's really fit for purpose.
Very true. And even in general, when it comes to working in a team and communication wise and activities wise and habits, behaviors, schedules, now that we're all remote and we hire across the globe, we've kind of opened a Pandora's box when it comes to different cultures and how we're all seeing and understanding work so different from each other. And yeah, there's similarities, but very often there will be things that you have to respect in a different culture when it comes to how they work and when they need to be off, how you talk to individuals from a specific country or continent and so on. So it's, yeah, so you can't really have a solution that just focuses on this market and then market it as a solution for everyone.
Agreed.
Right?
It's one of the things that I think should be a bigger advantage for startups building out of Europe than it actually is. When startups build in America, they tend to look to the American audience.
Yeah.
Because that's a big enough market. If they can build for that market and crack that market, yes, we made it. Whereas you look at doing that, if you happen to be building a startup in Belgium or France or the Netherlands, you look at your own country and you're like, we need a bigger market. We need to build for the whole of Europe. So right out of the gate, they're already thinking we need multi-currency, multilingual, multi-taxation compliance. How do we do all of these things? So in a lot of cases, I see European startups, when they start to actually accelerate and get product market fit, they can actually explode far faster because they were thinking outside their own country from the start. Whereas a lot of US startups only think US to start with.
Yeah. Though I've seen a not so positive pattern in Europe as well, where there's a lot of startup founders that immediately start looking at US because, that's a bigger market and it's a,
Do you think that's because it's a bigger market? Or do you think it's because it's a more prestigious market? Is it ego-driven? I want to break the US. Is it because of size or pride?
I think it might be both. I think there's another factor, which is familiarity in a sense. It's very easy to understand how to sell in US from a regulations, costs, customer acquisition, marketing, and so on. So if you live in Europe, at least for me, it was like this because I've started so many startups and failed them significantly. And every single time I would look to, well, I'm going to sell to US. I'm going to sell in UK and I'm going to sell to US because that's a bigger market. But I also understand it because I consume so much of the...
See it all the time on the TV. It seems familiar.
Yes. And then you're like, well, okay, so I find all of these resources because that's what I'm being basically pushed because I'm consuming so much of American services and so on. So I understand the dynamics of how to build a business that works there more than the Middle East, for example.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think it's that as always. It's size, reputation, and for Europe, at least some part of Europe might look a bit more familiar from doing business.
It is, but in the whole story of Misfit founders, I can give an example of where we really screwed up on that one. One of my early startups was a recruiting platform. We were focused around Twitter. This was back in about 2008, 2009. And we were helping companies with their recruiting. We built a little Twitter jobs engine. And I went over to South by Austin, Texas one year. Same thinking, like, this works for the UK. We can do this in the US, right? In the UK market, you talk about advertising your vacancies. We've got vacancies. We're hiring. It wasn't until day 2 in the US that I realised US never speaks about vacancies in that sense. If you say vacancies in the US, they think hotel rooms.
Yeah.
I'd spent 2 days talking about hotel rooms, and everybody's like, what's this guy going on about? 2 countries separated by a common language.
And that can also have a really big negative impact on what you're advertising, because when you think of vacancies in US, you think of fast track, right? So like vacancies can be hotels, can be toilets, right? So on the toilet thing is like vacant, not vacant, right? And because hotels is like, oh, come in, out, in and out. It's not like toilets. Terrible analogy, but it can also be seen as, oh, well, this person is calling their roles vacancies. This is a be here for a bit and then head off because I'm looking for someone else type of thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's what it feels.
It took us a couple of days to realize that using vacancies in the US really wasn't helping us.
I grew up with American culture, a lot of American TV. I think my accent also at least slightly gives it away.
A little.
And a lot of these things, I actually had to adapt to UK vocabulary and how you call and pronounce things. I'm curious, do you work from home?
Yeah.
Since was it for a very long time, or was it with the pandemic?
Yes. The firm I was working for would have been back in 97, 98, something like that. I was working for a firm in Surrey. And it was acquired by a larger firm. And they said, we're closing the Surrey office. You're going to have to work in central London now. I'm like, oh, hell no. So we came to an arrangement. It's like, I will do 4 days a week at home. I'll come into the office 1 day a week, make sure I've got time with my manager, report in, do team meetings. I'm in London 1 day a week. Cool. We're fine with that. That arrangement worked beautifully for a good few years. But it also very much gave me the mindset then of... nobody needs to be in an office 5 days a week. There's some time where you've got your head down, focus time, getting work done. There's also some time where you want to be in meetings with your team. That's also a good time to be in the office. But I haven't been 5 days a week in an office since then. It's not good for me and it's not good for other people around me. For a start, I'm too nosy, I'm too curious, and I'm too talkative. So if you've got a floor of developers, how do you think they like me walking around? Not much.
Yeah.
So I've always, ever since the late 90s, I've been at home at least 1 or 2 days a week, sometimes 3 or 4 days a week. If I need to go into town and be in an office to meet with people and to do brainstorming sessions, do planning sessions, absolutely. But I don't want to be there 5 days a week, and you don't want me there 5 days a week.
I'm exactly the same. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love being in the office.
Absolutely.
I love chit chatter. I love looking at people's computer and be like, oh, that's cool. Can I pair code with you and sit down and do stuff? But I realized the hard way that a lot of people don't, especially if you're their manager or their boss. And I have to put my likings and my desires away when I'm running a business like that.
Yep.
Who knows? Maybe in the future I'll have one day my perfect setup where, say, I have a bunch of creatives that love to just soak in as much information as possible, and they would be happy for me to be walking in the office between desks and chit chat all the time, and I'm not negatively impacting their performance and their focus and things like that. But I can only dream.
For me, as I say, with the guys at the moment, we get together on a Monday. We do brunch. If we need to get together again later in the week to go over some other things, then cool, we'll do that. But the ritual that we have at the moment is Monday brunch, and it'll take us 2 or 3 hours. We'll eat slow. We'll talk about an awful lot, and then we'll go our separate ways, and we'll crack on for the week.
You mentioned you don't believe that people should be in the office 5 days a week.
No, that's not necessarily what I believe. I believe that's not good for me.
Oh, okay.
Some people I know like to be in an office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Now, if that's good for you, great. You do that. But it's not great for me.
Okay, right. Thank you for clarifying that. What do you think about working less than 5 days a week? Because, there's this trend now with...
I think you're going to see more of it.
4 days work weeks.
Yep.
We've done it at Jigsaw. It was a complete success. I don't want to talk too much about it. I can talk to you about it afterwards. But I'm curious what your opinion is on it.
I think we're going to see more of it. I think one of the things that COVID did that was positive was actually help some people to realize what work-life balance really does look like. And I think there are now a lot more people who are willing to say, I'm not doing 80 hours a week for my job. If I can do it in 40, and maybe that's 4 long days and Fridays off. Now, there's some businesses for whom that won't suit. There are some that it will. But I do think the idea of a 4-day week is something that we are going to see more of in future.
Okay. But is that something that you want to apply? Is that something that you believe in a sense?
For what we're building next, it will depend, to a certain extent, on the hires that we find. If we find somebody who is absolutely perfect for a really critical role, but it's somebody that can only do Monday through Thursday, all right, well, let's figure out if we can make this a workable scenario. It needs to be workable for our customers, and it needs to be workable for everybody else on the team. If you find that actually there's two other people who now can't do anything on Friday because you're not here, well, that's not workable because you're now telling them that they can't work Fridays.
Yeah.
So, if we can find a way to make it work, then great. But it really depends on what role you're doing with that team as to whether it's workable or not.
Yeah. Very true. I'm asking and I'm pressing because I know that this is a very controversial topic.
Sure.
Nowadays. There is a lot of companies that think 4 days work week is, rubbish because
And I can
less
point to
performance.
examples where it's worked really well.
Yeah.
A friend of mine runs an events company called the Recruiting Events Company. They run major conferences in the US and in Europe. And they moved to a 4-day week, and he's had nothing but good things to say about it. It can work for some. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
In the same way that it's a company's choice to say whether or not we want to do this. It's also the employer's choice to say whether or not they wish to stay.
Yeah.
Employers
Exactly.
have a choice.
Yeah.
And
as this thinking evolves with not having set in stone 5 days a week just because that traditionally has been the,
well, you're talking about the days of the Industrial Revolution.
yeah.
You weren't seen to be working unless you were actual work producing goods.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Industrial Revolution was a while ago now. We need to be able to demonstrate we've moved on. It used to be that we would only ever measure output. Well, I hear a lot more businesses talking about measuring outcomes now.
Mm-hmm.
Are we creating the change? Are we creating the progress? Are we creating outcomes for our customers? Are we empowering them to do more or to do better? Those things are changing.
Yeah.
And as they change, so the workplace will evolve too. And I think the employers of the future that win on hiring the best talent will be the employers who are at least able to be open to the discussion and say, maybe this isn't right for us right across the firm, but it's okay for this role, and this role. Make the case. Show me how it can work for this role, and we're open to the conversation. Those are the employers that will win the best staff. There will also be some people who will say, I like the structure, I want to work 5 days a week, I want to be at my desk. Great. There'll be an employer somewhere who wants you.
Yeah.
There is a space and a place for everyone, but there's going to be, I suspect, just simply a lot more flex than there ever has been before.
Yeah, I think the workplace, in a sense, has always been a couple of steps behind in catching up when it comes to where we are with trends and matching our work ethos in a sense. But it is changing, and it's great to see that. I wanted to go back to the start of the pandemic and your business at that point. Only if this is public or you usually disclose these kind of things, but I'm curious, what was your revenue, your ARR, when you were...
We were a conference business, so it wasn't so much ARR as very, very seasonal revenue around ticket sales, sponsorships. And we were a business where we were growing the company over a period of years. I mean, our first conference in London, 2012, San Francisco, 2015, Singapore, 2019. So we didn't exactly have stable annual revenues or anything like that. But the team size, to give you a rough shape for that, is about 15 people full time.
15 people. Did you have to scale down your team size over the pandemic?
We looked at that in so many different ways, trying to cut it and trying to figure out how we could do the best that we could do. The main thing we did was, a few people, we had quite a lot out on furlough, taking use of that and government support. Myself and everybody else on the management team said, look, until we've got this stable and we know what the hell, done. I'm not taking a salary. Myself and my co-founders would just drop salaries completely. We were privileged in that we were able to do that, But it was more important to us that we were able to pay the people on the team and keep them in one place. So it was a mixture of furlough. There were a few people that dropped hours. So yeah, the team shape absolutely changed and flexed.
Yeah. Well, I feel that honestly that's the right thing to do. Deprioritizing leadership, founders versus employees for chunks of period of time like this, because at the end of the day, we have the most. It's true. We have the most to gain
Absolutely.
if the company goes amazing, right? So, like, you should also take the biggest.
You could take the biggest hit.
Yeah.
You know? I remember a story a few years back of a certain London startup, and the founder apparently used to rage around the office at 5:30, 6 o'clock. I'm like, why's everybody gone home? Why aren't they all as committed as me? Well, dude, because they don't all own 90% of the firm.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have the most to gain. So yeah, you take the first hit.
Yeah.
Them's the rules. Or should be.
I used to be like, in my early 20s, I used to think like that. I used to think, well, you need to put as much energy and passion as me, because as we grow, you're going to exponentially get better bonuses, better salaries, better share options, and so on. But I realized it doesn't really matter. You can have someone with 300-400K salary in your company. They're never going to care as much as you. Give someone the same amount of equity as you, as the founder that started day one and grew this business and went through so many, because that is investment as well, right? Those years of growing and challenges and pain and suffering, in a sense, that is investment as well. Give someone tomorrow the same equity as you, they're not going to care as much as you.
Nope, they won't. You know why? You started this because you wanted to solve this problem. They joined this because they wanted to get paid. So who do you think cares more about the problem?
Yeah. It is.
You can absolutely use equity as a huge motivator, and many startups do, and it can be very effective. But you know what? The only person who cared about this problem enough to start doing something was the founder.
Yeah.
So of course they're going to be more committed than anyone else. It's been their itch from day one, and now it's their baby.
It's the care for the problem, and combined with what I just said, which is the fact that they've probably
got the biggest upside.
Yeah, they spend a ton upside, but also they spend a ton of time.
Hells yeah.
And that's investment. Like everyone that doesn't recognize that, like I mentioned, I spent until 3 a.m. last night doing some work for Misfit founders. I now know that is investment. That is a significant investment on my behalf. It's not just like, although it sometimes can feel like doing something fun, because I am doing something that I really enjoy, but it is a commitment and a time investment. And over time, all of that accumulates to where it doesn't matter who I bring. They can be the person that at the end of the day also cares quite a lot about this topic. Still, they don't have the same investment that I've had up until now. So they're never going to care more than I care.
Absolutely not.
And that the business that you're running over the pandemic is the same business that you sold.
Yeah.
And when did you sell?
Last year.
Last year. Okay. Was it beginning of the year?
Yeah.
Late?
Feb 1st. Feb 1st, 2022, we closed the deal.
Okay. So we're almost a year apart in terms of selling. I'm curious, why sell?
Firstly, we come out of the pandemic. As an events business, just surviving the pandemic alone was quite the achievement. You know, we were... We certainly saw a few of our competitors go to the wall during that time. Coming out of the pandemic, and firstly, the founding team were burnt. You know, everybody was ready to move on and do something different. We've been in it for 12 years. So it's time for change from that perspective. But also the team themselves, they've managed to get us through, but it was tough on everybody. We were under-resourced. And I felt that by constructing a sale to a bigger organization, they would actually be able to put some of the support behind that team that team really deserved. So it's partially about supporting the team and partially about allowing the founding team to step out.
Yeah.
Those two reasons. And I also had a bit of a hinky feeling. We were coming out of COVID. Oh,
Yeah.
I trust my gut instinct on so many things. I really do.
Right.
And it very rarely leads me wrong. But we were coming out of the pandemic and I had a hinky feeling. I'm like, we're coming out of the pandemic and that's good. But somehow, I don't think we're done yet. I think there is something still wrong. And it was just a feeling. I couldn't shake it. I just couldn't shake it. And about 3 months later, Putin went into Ukraine and the markets collapsed. That was the window in which we did the deal. It was the only window in which we could have done the deal. If we'd have been 3 months later, Putin would have gone into Ukraine, markets would have collapsed, conferences everywhere would have been in trouble again, and that deal would not have been on the table. So we did get lucky on that timing, but it was also a hinky feeling in my gut saying, something's not right. Now might be a really good time to make a deal. So we did.
That's
It was a mixture of sort of gut feeling and a bit of luck. The way that the deal came together was a little different to some, I suspect, but
that you need a little bit of luck. I would say a pretty
100%.
significant amount of luck.
Absolutely.
Because when you said that, I just had a flashback to us getting seed investment in 2020. Like Nikki and I were working full time in 2018 and 2019 while also building a business. And we were making at one point at the end of 2019 $5,000 MRR, which it wasn't bad, but it wasn't sustainable. Like we couldn't sustain ourselves. And that's when we decided, we had a discussion, talk it through, and decided let's focus full time on this and get seed investment. And we managed to secure seed investment from someone in our ecosystem in January/February 2020.
Okay.
Not only that, the company that I was working for in London got acquired by Accenture in the same time. And of course, I had share options. I was also their first employee at that point.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the company, and at that point, it was 160 people. But it was such a lucky setup because a month later, the pandemic hit hard. And I still remember that we had the CEO of the company that was acquiring us flying over to Edinburgh. We were living in Edinburgh at that period, with the agreement for us to sign the investment agreement, the angel investor agreement, and to celebrate. And they were looking at flights because they didn't know if they were going to have a flight back to Germany. They were from Germany. Yeah. So it was just kicking off. And we've been told that if the pandemic would have hit earlier, they would have probably held their finances a bit tighter and probably wouldn't have invested at that point, would have waited it out. It would have been really, I don't know how our path would have looked like if that would have happened, because it would have meant we would have still be working, and Jigsaw might not exist today if we didn't get the investment when we got the investment. So you need a lot of luck.
You kind of do. I think there is an element of luck to it, but there's also a phrase that sticks with me constantly. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Very true. Yeah.
In my case, it's about, my luck comes from constantly putting myself out at other conferences, other events, helping people out, doing podcasts. I never know what good things are going to come back, but I do very much believe that karma does go around. I constantly get people that hit me up and say, hey, I've just been made redundant. Do you know of any jobs going from a senior product director? Honestly, I don't know right now. But I'll tell you what, if you drop me a line, I'll put it on LinkedIn and I'll share it in my network. Yeah. Somebody out there will know somebody out there who's looking for somebody just like you. And it's just putting that good karma out there into the world. It does come back around. Not always when you expect, but it does.
Yeah.
So my luck is because I constantly do push myself in ways like that and to do things like this and to tell those stories and to connect good people.
I mean,
it helps, man. It just helps.
Yeah, I mean, even if you get those lucky moments, luck is not gonna come by, knock at your door while you're watching Netflix 24/7.
100%.
Like why
Yeah.
that wouldn't
I
happen?
mean, I'm investing a couple hours here today. I have no idea what's going to happen out at the back of this. And you can confirm I'm not being paid for this interview. So,
What's gonna happen? You're gonna see your face on your timeline quite a lot.
yeah, there'll be somebody in there somewhere that's interesting with them. Maybe they'll connect me to the seed investor that I need next. Or maybe there's somebody that reaches out and says, hey, you sounded great. I'd love to work for you in future. This is what I do. And maybe I find a next hire. I don't know. But the harder I work is I do these things. And then that karma comes back around in some way. Some good things come back from it. But it can't come back to you unless you put it out there.
Very true. Do you do a lot of these podcasts?
Maybe
let me not say these, because my podcast is very
this is a little
unique,
different.
Okay.
This is a little different. I don't know, maybe a couple or three a year, 2 or 3 a year, maybe.
Okay,
Not many.
And you're quite active on social media, and do you consider yourself a influencer?
Oh God, no. I don't take myself terribly seriously, so I can't expect anybody else to either.
Okay.
I used to be pretty active on Twitter. Please don't go look for me there, because I don't. The account is still there, but I don't really touch it anymore because that dude. No. The giant cats and the food are all on Instagram, and pretty much everything else is LinkedIn these days. I'm poking around with Blue Skies, poking around with Threads. I like social because it's an opportunity to have conversations with people. And frankly, that's why I love events. They inspire thoughts, they make connections. They're great. I love that. So yeah, I love social. I am very regretful of what's happened to Twitter over the last couple of years because frankly, that was my favorite. I really did love it. I adored Twitter. I thought it was a beautiful platform. The dynamic there and the way that it drove concise thought, I adored. I thought it was fabulous. But I think it is dead and buried. So
all good things must come to an end.
Absolutely. Most of my stuff these days is on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, I think founder brand building is quite an important thing. Although some founders don't look at it like that. Oh, what I'm doing is not building my own personal brand, although it is. If you're active on social media, if you network, if you go to events, expand your network through various means, then you're building a brand of your own.
Sure.
Since we connected, I've seen your content, your posts, your on my timeline, and that kind of imprints your online persona in my head. So, I know who you're talking about, or I know this person that does this. Let me put you in touch, and so on. So it is a very powerful and important
absolutely
type of activity as a founder, and it surprises me that not more people do it. I mean, I know why people don't do it, because you get so involved with your craft and such that you don't feel an immediate ROI from being more present.
I think in some, there is a lack of patience. They want to put the effort in and they want to see the result come out. And for me, brand and social are not like that. It takes time. You have to lay foundations. You have to build credibility. Gradually, that will gather momentum. But it doesn't happen overnight. And there are some people who just don't have the patience for that, or think their time is better served elsewhere. And they may well be right. Different people are going to get things done in different ways. But for me, it's always been something that's just happened, and I've found to be fairly comfortable to have that roll alongside. And there are times when I don't do any podcasts for 6 months, and then I'll do a couple in a month. And it comes in waves, right?
Yeah. Don't worry about it. The amount of social media snippets that I'm going to extract from this will allow you to take a 6 month sabbatical from podcast.
Well, I appreciate that, my man.
Don't trust anything I say. I just want you for my own podcast, and that's it.
It's all good.
So I'm curious, in your career, be it working for someone or with your own businesses, what was the hardest moment for you? I know there might be many because we all have hard moments, but if the first thing that comes into your head when someone asks, oh, what was a hard moment in your career?
Realizing that the sale of Mind the Product was the right thing to do was also an incredibly hard thing to do. Felt like the right thing to do to try and put more resource behind that team and to give the founders an easy path to step back and go and do what they wanted to do. But it was also an incredibly close-knit team that had been through the pandemic together. And you knew that when that firm was owned by somebody else, things would change. And that was a real hard one to reconcile.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I had sat in that seat, I think 2 months ago, another founder that said the exact same thing about selling their business. And it's like the hardest thing I've ever done, like I've ever had to come to terms with, in a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely a period there where there was grief, I mean, it was a good deal. I'm not regretful in that respect, but there was definite grief of saying this thing that was so beautiful that we poured so much of ourselves into for a decade.
12 years, yeah.
It's now something else, and it's going to change, and some of those friendships will change as a result. Yeah, that was real hard, man.
How big was the team when you sold?
I think 16.
16.
Yeah. I mean, the team over a period of about 7 or 8 years flexed between 8 and 16. Kind of up a little, down a little, up a little, down a little. But yeah, it was always tight knit, People who cared deeply for one another. We tried very much to hire responsible humans who cared for the people that they worked with. But you also got to remember that we had a very different team dynamic. So if you're a remote team, you don't see each other very often. If you're an office team, you maybe see each other a few times a week when you're in the office, go for beers. You're in a conference. What tends to happen is the week before the conference, you'll move everybody in the hotel together for the few days before the conference. So you live together in London for a couple of days, and it's super high pressure. Then you have the conference, this massive euphoria, and then the after party, you break, you all go recover. 6 months later, there's another conference. We all move back into the hotel and live together for another couple of days, and it's super intense again as the thing builds. Bam, done, break. So the team dynamic was, I think, a little different to some businesses.
I suppose, yeah. It's phased, right?
Absolutely. But there were periods where we lived together. There were periods where we never saw each other. There are periods where we traveled the world together. We're working today in London, and then a couple of months' time, Hamburg, and then San Francisco, and then, oh, crap, whose batshit insane what idea was it to go and do Singapore? I guess we're in Singapore now. But that kind of builds this interesting team dynamic, yeah.
So what were some of the challenges with that? Was it logistics? Was it behavioral? What were some of the challenges?
We had different cultures on the team. People from California, Canada, Australia, Sweden at various different points. So there was definitely a cultural mix going on there. Because we were so international in so many ways, there was pretty much always somebody on the team somewhere who was jet lagged.
And then there's people that have jet lag that you feel like they're dying, and then people that are, I'm okay.
Yep. And then, you work, well, hang on, we're partially a techie team, but we're also partially an events team. So that means in this corner we have the introverts, and in that corner we have the extroverts. It was such a mixed bag. I think that was part of what made it so strong.
Yeah.
But it also created some friction here and there. We got good at managing it and dealing with it because we tried to hire adults who wanted to care about the people that they worked with.
Yeah.
But, it was certainly a disparate team in many ways.
Would you ever do something bigger than that in terms of the size of the team?
That's an interesting one because with Rodeo now, we're going to start with a team. We've got a co-founding team of 3. If we can do the raise that we want to now, we'll grow that to maybe 5 or 6, and we'll keep it super tight, maybe the first year or so. Try and move fast and light. Beyond that, sure, we'll grow it some more beyond that. I don't know how far I actually want that team size to go because I've worked inside organizations of thousands. I am not that guy. So maybe there's a point at which I need to recognize that, hey, maybe the role for me in future now is evangelizing chairman, and we bring in other grown-ups to actually run teams in a really efficient, structured manner to get to that sort of scale where we can go do the IPO. I mean, I've never done an IPO. I've got that box to tick yet. Maybe I can't get out until I've ticked that box. But yeah, the actual sort of team size and shape thing, I don't know. I'm really good at gathering people, inspiring people, getting them going in a particular direction.
Yeah.
But the detailed management of people, not so much.
So let me ask you this: would you rather? No, let's make this scenario. Let's say you said that you have this business in you, like for the next 10, 15 years, right? And then that's it for you. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna retire. Advisor here, mentor there, and so on.
Yeah, and like I say, if it gets to the point where the team size is actually scaling and we need to bring in some really great lieutenants, then great. Let's do that. But maybe at that point, my role looks like evangelizing chairman or something like that. I mean, I am dangerous out on the road. I can cover a lot of ground, meet a lot of people, and get a lot of people very excited. So there may come a point where the board turn around to me and say, right, you, less time in meetings, more time on the road.
Yeah.
Now, if that becomes the right choice for the company, then my main objective is going to be to say, how does this thing thrive? Where am I best deployed? And if that's me out on the road doing that thing, then great, let's go do that. I don't mind. I'm not going to get hung up about that at all.
Would that even be, let me give you a curveball. Let's say that 5 years down the line, your company's growing quite fast, quite big in size. You're more comfortable in, being an evangelist, being on the road and so on. But there's an IPO in sight in let's say about 2 years. Would you stay in the CEO role so that you have that in the bag, the IPO'd, I took a company to IPO, or would you still switch to being the founder that also is the advocate and leave the CEO, leave someone else to take the company to an IPO?
I mean, having never done an IPO, I can imagine a circumstance where the board would turn around and say, you're not the one to CEO this, you've not done, we'd like to bring in a grown-up who has.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. I mean, frankly, I can still say, founded, IPO'd. Yeah, there's that box checked.
Yeah.
What's the most likely scenario to make that come true? Let's do that one.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get hung up about that. If I can say I legit founded a firm with a couple of my great buddies and we took that thing to IPO, I'm not gonna care what my job title is when we get there.
Okay. Yeah. Because some people,
I mean, I've got an ego, but it ain't that big.
yeah, some people definitely do care about that.
I've seen some of those people, and I hope not to be that person.
I've came to I'm at peace with the fact that there's a high chance I'm never going to take a company to IPO.
Might not happen. There may well be a really interesting exit offer along the way. Yeah. And if that's the case and everybody says it's the right thing, then fine, let's do that. I'm not going to sit here saying I've got a singular vision of what this needs to be in the future and everybody needs to bend themselves to my will.
Yeah. What
I will say is if you all come at me, you've all got the right aligned arguments and you can make a good case, I'm always going to be open to the conversation. My early itch to scratch here is I believe community organizers are good for humanity and deserve better. So if we're scratching that itch and moving forwards, I'm going to be pretty good with that. I also deliberately have 2 co-founders who I deeply, deeply trust. So if they come at me with one voice, I'd be a bloody idiot to argue with them.
Yeah.
I worked for somebody at a startup years back who made a point of hiring the very smartest people he could and then ignoring all of them. I mean, come on.
But were you always like this, or do you feel like you've changed over time? Because I feel that I've gained wisdom now in my 30s, but in my early 20s, I was a hardhead and very opinionated and very, no, I know best, I know better, and so.
Yeah, I've been that guy. I've absolutely been that guy. I think probably the last year or so, that taking the time to reflect thing has been the biggest bit of personal growth because I deal with feedback and challenges in a very different way now to the way I did 12 months ago.
I usually have a couple of questions, like rapid fire questions for...
Everybody's got a wrap up ritual, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. For the exit. But before that, I just wanted to ask if, I don't know, maybe you have you're curious of anything from my journey or want to ask me any questions, it's okay if you don't.
I mean, a similar confession to yourself. I've not gone terribly deep on the research.
Perfect.
I was intrigued by the title, Misfit Founders.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to start a podcast interviewing founders who consider themselves to be misfits or who happily identified with that phrase? My career has jumped about a fair bit, so I saw the phrase and I'm like, yep, that me. But why did you decide to pursue that route?
It's interesting. So I've failed so many businesses in my early 20s. Every single company that I started, I've had to let it go in not a very positive way. Everything that I got into, I felt that I was out of place, that I was always very determined. I would say I've never been shy about getting into an industry, but determined in a sense of I have something to prove to myself, not I know I can do this, right? So I always entered and said, I'll find a way. I'm not confident in what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll find a way. And I never did. It took me getting a job in UK, which was my first job. I've spent the first 3 years in UK just doing freelancing engineering projects and trying to build SaaS businesses, trying to be the next Zuck, the next this, that. And I was always missing the mark because I just didn't knew what I was doing. And it took me going through education in a sense, working for a company that grew from 0 to 160 employees and got sold to Accenture and such, and me being part of that entire journey, learning how to work with people, learning how to communicate, learning about the various components of running a business and growing a business. And then Jigsaw, and also, of course, getting the right founder. And then Jigsaw was a completely different story after this growing up that I've done. But I failed a lot. And the basically the keyword of misfit came from, it was interesting because we had while at Jigsaw, before selling, we had a workshop with our marketing team, with our head of marketing and our marketing team. And I said, right, I have so much to share. I have so many thoughts, but it's all scattered. It's all kind of like all over the place. I really want to shape what my founder persona and who I am and what I'm trying to vocalize. So our head of marketing, just a brilliant professional, stood me down, and we had this workshop for founder brand. And the keyword that we came up with was misfit, because I'm a misfit because all of the reasons that that they uncovered during that workshop. So that's how the misfit path. But then I also realized there's so many people from all walks of life that failed at running a business, or that have so many fears and so many little demons that prevent them from even starting. So that's why I wanted to start Misfit Founders, because I've uncovered the value of feedback, mentorship, private conversations with peers, mentors, individuals. And I've gained so much value out of those conversations that I felt this is what makes me, is all of these conversations and information and knowledge that I'm accumulating from all of these private one-to-one conversations that I have with people. And it was actually Nikki that overheard a couple of conversations of this and saw how much value the other person was providing me, but also in those conversations when I was mentoring others, of all of the good conversations that were happening. And she just purely said, there's a lot of value in these Zoom calls.
Yeah.
More people need to hear these things. So that's how Misfit Founders started. I want to push a bit the boundaries of what we share with others online.
You're reminding me of a conversation I had, must be 15, 20 years ago in my recruiting days. I was actually hiring tech team for a founder back then, and he just got his first round of funding and wanted me to help him find a CTO. So we ran through the business they were in. They were doing a payments platform. He ran me through the business model and ran me through the architecture and the technical skills. I'm like, yep, I can absolutely find you that. But tell me, is there anything else that will really make or break a hire for you? Give me one other thing, something that's not on the tech sheet. What else you got? And he said, I need a CTO who has experienced a horrific failure before. Tell me more. What's the logic? And he said, if it all went well, you don't stop long enough to reflect because you go straight to celebrate. So you don't know whether you are good or lucky. But if you lost, that hurt and you figured out why.
Yeah. And you're also more risk adverse versus, always things going your way, and you soften up. Soften up. Soften up. Yeah. When that happens, like I feel that you drop your guard a bit, and you don't think of what if, and so on. So yeah, I completely agree with that. So yeah, I have a lot of. They must be paying me a ton of money. Next job that I get, they should be paying me a ton of money because I failed so many businesses. I'll be like,
you've used the word failure an awful lot this afternoon.
Yeah.
Again, one of the powerful conversations I had with somebody a few years back. This one was more recent, but somebody was saying to me, "Look, stop talking about your previous business as a failure. Did you learn something? Oh yeah,
pretty much, yeah.
Well, then it wasn't a failure. It's only a complete failure if you fail to learn. If you did learn something, there's your positive outcome. That will enable you to go on and do it better or do something different or do something more. The only failure is the failure to learn."
Very true. Yeah, that is 100% true. However, I keep on using very deep and harsh words for this because that's what people relate the most with.
Absolutely.
And that, like, you kind of grasp to things when you realize, when you use things like failure, challenges, just being out of place, beating yourself up, because we all do.
Absolutely.
If I start positioning more as my learnings and things like that, it kind of softens up a bit, and the relatability score drops in very technical, analytical terms, in a sense. And that's what I want. I want, if you've seen any of the trailers of the videos and so on, like I put an accent on the impact, the shock factor, these type of things, because we relate more to that than wins and teachings. There's a lot of content out there that teaches, which is great, right? This is more of a group therapy in a sense, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, 3 questions to end this. I don't know if you had the questions before. You might have. Potentially, you might be ready. No. Right, rapid fire.
I'm not that quick, but I can work fast. So.
First question: what's a quote that you live by?
Pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
That karma always comes back around. It can't come back to you if you don't put it out there.
Yeah.
Pay it forward.
Yeah, it's the same with sharing your knowledge. Like you're paying it forward.
Absolutely.
That's what I love to do. Share. Book that changed your life, either personal or professional.
I'm going to go on a professional one. It's called Rework. It's from the folks behind Basecamp. There's been some stuff in the news over the last few years about Basecamp, not necessarily a firm I want to align too closely with, but that particular book is a great deep dive on thought patterns and instincts if you're trying to start something new. How to do discovery, how to keep fresh eyes, how to keep motivating. It's a great book. I tend to reread it about every 18 months or so. It's a great refresher on really good habits.
That's the type of books that it impacted you if you reread it.
Oh, I've read it like 5 or 6 times.
And then a good habit that you advocate for.
Taking the time to reflect. If you had something that went really well or it went really badly, step away from your desk, go and walk for 5 or 10 minutes if you can.
Yeah.
Especially if you can get out into the fresh air. For me, I find it stimulating. It changes my brain waves. I think through more clearly and I capture lessons better. Take the time to reflect.
Yes.
In whatever way feels best to you.
We talked about that. I'll definitely check out your post about the feedback stuff.
Man, that was great. It was a huge learning moment for me. And the LinkedIn post was because partially, if I write something, it sticks. I remember it better if I write it.
Yeah.
I used to live tweet at conferences and people are like, are you live tweeting because it spreads your brand? Like, no, I'm live tweeting because it means I'll bloody remember it.
I've seen that in a SaaS talk where you mentioned a couple of speakers. Oh, I really love this this speaking session. And I was thinking to myself, that's a really good way to bookmark the stuff that you enjoy.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. So yeah.
That's very smart. Right. I have a gift for you. I don't know if you've seen this.
I have not.
No? That's why I don't share it that much on social media, because I like the surprise of guests. So because you went to the trouble of coming over and recording this, I'm gonna get so much content out of this. You've seen the format. Like, I share a lot of the snippets on social media, and that's what gets a lot of exposure. So you technically contributed to potentially hundreds or thousands of aspiring founders with your stories.
That's
so
good to hear.
I want to give you this coin. So every single guest that comes over gets a coin with the number of the guest engraved. So you're guest
cute.
17th. You're also now officially a misfit.
Man, I've been one of those since I was about 3 years old.
Now it's formal. Now it's official, okay? And, oops. And on the other side, it has the Misfit Founders logo. And
that's really cute. Nice work.
it can also, it's a standing thing, so you can put it in your whatever.
Oh, there is
the
absolutely a knick-knack shelf with all sorts of little weird things. That's going in. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Oh, man, that's really sweet. Thank you.
Cheers. Awesome.
Okay.
That's it. That's a wrap.
I've got a question for you.
Yes. On camera.
If you like.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Okay. I'm recording again. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
This is all about sharing lessons, right?
Yeah.
Putting that content out there into the world, helping people to grow, to be better, to inspire the next generation to follow along. My network after the past 12 years building Mind the Product is pretty decent, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So take a note through. If there's anybody I can introduce you to, I'll be happy to. Anybody off the top of your head? Who would you love to have on that chair next time?
I'm always looking for diversity in thinking, in backgrounds, and as well as female founders and leaders and people from underrepresented minorities and groups and things like that. I feel like feeling out of place when you're running a business or starting a business is not a specific segment of people. I think we all do. And I want to spread as much of diverse voices on this podcast. So anyone that has interesting stories and comes from a diverse background and so on, struggled with things, would love to have them over.
Great stuff.
Then anything that, because you go to events, you're in this event space. I think I found the perfect recipe for Misfit Founders Roadshow, which is kind of like linking up with events. That's why I went to SaaS Talk. And I think it's a really good setup where if I can go to these events, be on the road, deploy my studio, and then bring some of the speakers and some of the interesting attendees over. Anyways, everyone's on a kind of like a media tour when they're at these events. They're more likely to sit down and chat and make time for it. So any events in the future that you're attending or have any relation with, more than happy to get involved.
I can think of a few.
Awesome.
You'll see them in your inbox.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.